What's up, addicts? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Coming back to you with another 12-team mock draft. Going to do this one from the 6th slot and discuss what the strategy looks like drafting in the middle. Now, I feel of the entire draft board this year, it's just based on ADP. Obviously, things can go different on draft day, and we'll see how this mock draft goes. But in my opinion, the 6th slot is actually the hardest one to draft from. So you have your pretty much locked and loaded running backs coming out of the first 3-4 picks if you count Alvin Kamara in that mix. And then things start to get a little dicier from the running back position. You can go Michael Thomas at the 1-6, but I'm still very I'm much more inclined to go running back than wide receiver early this year. I think Devontae Adams could potentially outscore Michael Thomas, but I'm not going to reach for Devontae Adams at the 1-6 with a lot of running backs still on the board. So this is where it gets very interesting in the strategy, because when you come back, that second pick, you're normally missing out on all of the running backs, the top tier of receivers, and then you're having to choose between like the next tier of receivers, tight ends, kind of like the same thing we dealt with earlier. But then you don't get the benefit of getting an earlier 3rd and a 5th round pick. So let's see how this goes. Like I said, I still feel like the 6th spot is probably the hardest, but all right. So redid this. We started out and Saquon Barkley fell to us at the 1-6, which I just don't see that happening. This is a much more likely scenario. All right. So we have 5 running backs go off the board. We're left with Michael Thomas and then running backs like Dalvin Cook, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon still on the board. And, a lot of people would recommend going Michael Thomas here. Again, I'm advising against it because I still feel like the tier of running backs left at this spot are above what Michael Thomas is going to be able to produce this year. Dalvin Cook, still uncertain whether or not he's actually going to play a full season with the current contract situation being as it is. I would be very wary in drafting Dalvin Cook over some of these other guys. I'd still take him as long as you can get Alexander Madison, but at this point, if I have the 1-6, I'm going to choose to avoid the risk. We're going to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire here. I actually have Miles Sanders ranked 1 spot ahead of Clyde, but I feel like with the injury potential there, with Miles Sanders being out for a portion of the preseason here, or of the training camp, it gives us a little bit of pause and just making sure we get the running back that we think is going to have the vast majority of touches on his team, on a really good team. Then let's go ahead and we'll grab Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And then jumping back to the 2nd round. So this is a good scenario for the 6th round pick, or the 6th pick. This is what you're hoping for. You're hoping that someone reaches for a tight end, someone reaches for a quarterback, because then you at least get one. I feel like there's a clear top 18 players. There's 14 running backs ending with Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, and then there is, the top 4 receivers here. So one person in that top 18 either goes off consensus or drafts a quarterback, drafts a tight end, or takes a receiver like Hopkins or Godwin. You're set, because I still truly believe in Aaron Jones. There's already reports saying that A.J. Dillon isn't even going to get that much work to start the year. And if he does, he's most likely going to be supplanting Jamal Williams anyway. People are forgetting how efficient Aaron Jones was last year. It wasn't just the touchdowns. He was actually a really good running back overall. And he's going to continue to score a lot of points. So people that are fading him are going to end up regretting that. So starting this draft out with 2 solid running backs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Aaron Jones, that is the best that you can hope for in this spot. If Aaron Jones was gone, then we would have to be looking at potentially taking Chris Godwin, taking a tight end. Probably would have gone Chris Godwin there just to show you what the 2 wide receivers look like, but we lucked out and got 2 running backs there. Now, I'm not looking really going running back at this point. We can choose between, I like all 4 of these guys here: Kenny Golladay, Allen Robinson, DJ Moore, and Odell Beckham Jr. I like DJ Moore the best of all of them, but I think I've taken him a good bit in some of the mocks already. So let's go ahead and pivot. We'll take Kenny Golladay and show you what that ends up looking like, because I typically take Marvin Jones a bit later. So I want to see what we end up taking in the 7th, 8th round if we already have Kenny Golladay up top. So we start off Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Aaron Jones, and Kenny Golladay. Come back. Now, David Montgomery was injured this morning. We'll see the severity of it, so that's going to change the ADP slightly. But there's still going to be a ton of receivers here that we can choose from. Of these guys, my personal favorite is Robert Woods, the target aficionado there in Los Angeles, someone that's been perennially underrated for basically his entire time there in Los Angeles. I think he's going to get a lot of work this year and very underrated as a 4th-round pick. So we're going to take Robert Woods. And as we've discussed in our strategy videos, pretty much my main goal is to make sure I have at least 3 running backs and 3 wide receivers through the first 6 or 7 rounds, depending or not whether I take a quarterback like Dak Prescott. Now, as we can see, typically the strategy has been to grab DeAndre Swift in the 5th round. DeAndre Swift is seeing his ADP jump, Mark Ingram as well. So there's not really that many running backs that I'm super interested in. Cam Akers is someone I'm looking at potentially here. We look at the wide receivers. Keenan Allen could see a good bit of increased targets with Mike Williams potentially missing a few games, but that's going to be a very low volume offense. T.Y. Hilton, I think, is going to have a decent year, but I'm looking for Phillip Rivers to focus more on the running backs and see if Paris Campbell or Michael Pittman end up stealing a good bit of the work there. So there's not really any receivers here that I'm all that excited about jumping for. So since we normally take DeAndre Swift, we'll go with the pivot play and take the other rookie, someone with Darrell Henderson going down already and potentially missing week 1. I think Cam Akers could come out of the gate with a very strong workload. Now watch him end up, being out-touched by John Kelly and Malcolm Brown. That would be terrible, but that's how fantasy football works sometimes. Okay, so Dak Prescott is gone, and as we mentioned in our quarterback strategy, I'm really only looking at Dak Prescott in the 6th round. I don't really care to reach for Kyler or Deshaun Watson here. We already have 3 running backs and not really anything else on the board. Kareem Hunt would be the only other one I'd be hoping to fall this far. James White is interesting. I like him from like a floor perspective with a decent weekly ceiling, but I don't think we want to jump that far. So this is where we're testing the waters here between AJ Green and Devontae Parker. I like both of these guys. AJ Green I've been very high on, but I've been souring a little bit with that hamstring injury. If he ends up missing any more time, if he doesn't get back to full speed this week, then I'm going to officially take AJ Green off my guy status. But if AJ Green is able to fully recover this week and is back to running full routes and fully involved in practice, like AJ Green is either going to be like 4 rounds undervalued or overvalued. And in the 6th round, I really like the upside that AJ Green presents because he could easily become my best receiver within a few weeks if he is able to regain any of his old form. And the last time we saw him, he truly was a wide receiver 1. I know that's been a while, so it's a risk, but let's go ahead and we'll take AJ Green here for the sake of seeing what this team looks like. So at this point, we've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Aaron Jones, Kenny Golladay, Robert Woods, Cam Akers, and AJ Green coming in at flex. So we still are missing a quarterback and a tight end and then jumping to the bench. Now, for those of you that are new to fantasy football, I know that the typical thought process is, okay, well, I need to fill out my roster before I go and start filling out my bench, but that is actually not the case, especially when we're talking about quarterbacks and tight ends. The value runs pretty deep this year, so if you sacrifice taking a wide receiver or a running back in this spot, jumping for quarterback, you're not really gaining optimal value, and you do need depth, especially this year with the potential for players to end up being thrown on the COVID list. You're going to really want to be able to have other people to pull from. I mean, sometimes people just bust. AJ Green could end up re-injuring his hamstring. Cam Akers could end up getting out-touched in the first week. Any of these guys could get hurt pretty early on in the season. You want to make sure you have depth. So if you don't take a tight end or a quarterback early, don't feel like you need to reach for one in the 7th or 8th round just to fill out your starters first. You can keep punting that position. And that's what we're planning on doing here. So from a running back perspective, the only guy I'm really looking at here is Antonio Gibson, potentially Tariq Cohen if David Montgomery's injury is serious, but I feel like there's no way the Bears are going to go into the season with Cordero Patterson and Tariq Cohen as their main running backs. So they're probably going to trade for somebody or sign Devonta Freeman. So I'm going to avoid that situation right now. And we look at the wide receivers. Julian Edelman is here, who I like, and I'm potentially thinking about grabbing Cam Newton, so getting the stack there would be cool. Jarvis Landry is always undervalued, but I do think of all the players that could potentially have a down season this year in Cleveland, I like Jarvis Landry the least. Not looking at Deebo Samuel, so this is where I would normally take Marvin Jones, but let's still go ahead and take Julian Edelman. We'll just have a very old, we have a very old receiver core here. Kenny Galladay, our youngest, at 26, Robert Woods at 28, AJ Green at 32, and Julian Edelman at, I believe, 35. So very old receivers here. We're going to need to grab some youth at some point. And then we see Jarvis Landry come back to us. I mean, although I'm expecting some regression from him, passing on him in the 8th round just doesn't seem right. We see Antonio Gibson went. Zach Moss is creeping up and up. I really liked Zach Moss as a value when you could get him in the 9th or 10th round, but now that he's all the way up to the early part of the 8th, that's kind of crazy to me. I like Matt Ryan a lot in this tier. Since he went, I'm not really looking at quarterback this round either. Tyler Higbee is interesting, but I already have Robert Woods. We'll take Jarvis Landry, who he and Marvin Jones are arguably probably the best value receivers that you can get this late in the draft. So let's see. There's just not really any interesting running backs to me at this point that we have to take, except for maybe Chase Edmonds. So I know Kenyon Drake is missing time right now due to that walking boot that he's in. I know the person on pick 12 would probably be hoping that he would fall to him. So we're going to go ahead and take Chase Edmonds here just in case that injury for Kenyon Drake is a little bit more serious. Chase Edmonds would become an instant league winner. And that's really what you're going to start doing with a lot of these picks later in the draft, is just taking running backs that have the potential to massively outperform their position. And then, as we stated earlier, we were planning on taking Cam Newton to stack with Julian Edelman. Not even going to think about this one because I know Cam Newton's ADP continues to rise. Right now, it's in the 11th round, but grabbing him in the 10th just to make sure we get him. Perfect. I'm going to do that every single time. So we have 5 wide receivers, 4 running backs right now. I like Deshaun Jackson, like Sterling Shepard. There's a few interesting guys here. I think we can punt tight end one more round at this point. We can go ahead and take Christian Kirk. I think Christian Kirk is a little bit undervalued right now. People are overestimating the amount of touches that DeAndre Hopkins is going to take from him. I think that offense will actually be a little bit more balanced than we might assume. Now, in terms of tight ends, I still love Mike Gesicki, TJ Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith. All 3 of those guys are here. I want to make sure I get one of them, and I'm afraid they might not make it back to me in round 13, so we'll take our favorite in Mike Gesicki. So as you can see, again, if you guys are new to fantasy football and that strategy hasn't really been presented to you, even though I'm only starting my first 7 picks, I started filling up my bench, and now I have a stronger core of receivers and running backs. Even though I didn't grab my quarterback and tight end until round 10 or 12, I have some depth on my bench here with Jarvis Landry, Chase Edmonds, Christian Kirk, and Julian Edelman. So that's just something you want to consider depending on your roster construction and depending on your league's settings. There's not really any need to reach for a quarterback or a tight end because we can still get guys like Mike Gesicki and Jonnu Smith this late. Now, when you are drafting from this tier of guys, I like grabbing 2 of them because there's no guarantee that either of them will break out, and having 2 will at least give you the opportunity to potentially hit on one of them. And at this point, we have, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 receivers, and we have only 4 running backs. So we'll take an upside shot at running back here. And this is actually a little bit opposite of what I normally do, but that's kind of the point of mock drafts, is trying out different things. I would normally try to finish with more running backs than receivers, but in this case, I was okay with taking a few more receivers since we were getting so many values with Landry and Edelman late. I think we can potentially trade one of those guys for someone later that might not perform in the first couple weeks. A package deal to grab someone like Jonathan Taylor if he's not getting the touches that people are hoping for in the first couple weeks, or if a trade happens. So, there's always things that you can do after the fact. But in terms of running backs here, Joshua Kelly's been killing it in camp. Justin Jackson was originally slated to be the RB2 there, but it looks like Joshua Kelly is already proven to be the better back there. I wouldn't really want to handcuff with Darrell Williams. I think the pick here is either McFarland or Kelly, and I think Kelly has the better shot at getting touches pretty early on, and we'll go with Kelly. So that finishes up our roster there. We've got Cam Newton, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Aaron Jones, Kenny Golladay, Robert Woods, Mike Gesicki, Cam Akers, AJ Green. On our bench, we got Julian Edelman, Jarvis Landry, Chase Edmonds, Christian Kirk, Jonnu Smith, and Joshua Kelly. Now, again, if I were to redo anything in this draft, just for the sake of argument, trying to think here, you could potentially have taken Antonio Gibson over Julian Edelman, but I don't really think I would have done that. If I would have waited at quarterback, Damian Harris was already gone. So, I mean, pretty much that's the thing that sucks about pick 6. Is it feels like every time you have players that you want to take, they're going to disappear by the time it comes back to you because you're having to wait a full round every single time. You have to wait 10 picks on this side and 12 picks on this side. So it feels like every time you have two people, you know if you take one, the other one's going to be gone. But overall, I'm not super disappointed with this team. If this was your starting roster, my main recommendation for you pretty early on would be to either trade for a running back that starts out slow that you think has the potential to finish the year strong, and also be very diligent to grab any running backs on the waiver wire that have any potential to massively outperform where they were, or in this case, not being drafted. So, I mean, Chase Edmonds gives us that kind of upside already, but I normally like to walk into the season with 3 of those guys. So with only 2 of them, with Kelly and Edmonds, I'd probably be looking to dump either Gesicki or Smith, whoever doesn't really show out in week 1, or if someone gets hurt, obviously we could move on from them. But overall, pretty happy with this team. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Also be doing a super flex draft here later today that was recommended by a few of you guys. So wanted to go ahead and share that with you. But thank you guys so much for watching, and hope you are enjoying everything we're putting out there. About 2 weeks away from the season, so we'll keep going strong and see you guys in the next